One of the questions that came up, and I mentioned that we had, in particular, was lymphoma, where we had questions about whether or not there was something that was a little out of the usual, I should say. And partly that's because we did not see a consistent difference across comparisons with both state and county data. So we don't know whether this is just a finding that was by chance alone, because remember, if we do more and more comparisons, the chance that you're going to find what's a chance association still exists, or whether it's something real. And if it is real, what does it mean? So yeah, we are pledged to go back and look in more detail at this question about whether or not there is something unusual about lymphoma in this area. It was not a large increase, but it was enough to raise our interest and communicate that to the community. What we're going to be able to do, I think, most importantly, is we will be adding additional years of data, because additional years of data will be coming into the registry.
Because we haven't closed the book. Again, that comes back to people saying, well, did you say there's no cancer cluster? Well, no, that's not. We can only talk about a very limited time period and using a limited data source and looking at certain specific cancers. And even then, we've identified that with that data, with those years that we looked at, with those cancer groupings, we actually do need to investigate more and are investigating more and are waiting for the next year's data to be available to add the power of one more year's worth of data to be able to take a look at how things are. So we're actually not closing the book.
Dr. Brookmeyer's office has been very cooperative with us, as well as Dr. Mitchell, but their investigation only covers a short period of time, and the fact that they're claiming that there is not a cancer cluster around Fort Detrick. Now, I would like to see more numbers and a larger span as to the number of deaths that have occurred, of people that have lived in and around the Fort Detrick area.
I would say that they was, somebody from the Army or higher up was to come out and say, yeah, we screwed up, all of our experiments, because we didn't know what we was doing, and as a result, we've killed a bunch of innocent Americans, and now we're going to put a stop to it. We're not going to do it no more, and we apologize. I don't know what else you could ask.
I'm going to do everything I can to get this brought to a federal level where we get a regulatory agency akin to the nuclear industry for the bioindustry. And that will be, CDC is not it, by the way. CDC, which I'll talk about in a minute, doesn't have a clue. It has to be a separate entity that is looking at this overall safety issue, the design basis, the design-based accidents, all of this. It has to have the tools to mandate corrective action, and it has to have the tools in place to conduct independent inspection and monitoring and levy penalty as seen fit.
If they are the cause, and we can't prove they aren't, they can't prove they aren't either. That's the sad part. They can't prove they didn't, they can't prove they didn't. So our hands are tied, really. We talk to people like yourself, we might be able to do something about it, because I'm worried about the next generation that's here. There's still people moving in here. They don't have no idea what's over there, or they wouldn't be here. If the idea was there, they'd be gone. They wouldn't stay here. They would never come here.
Now, what would I like to see happen? Number one, full disclosure. We're tired of the dog and pony show. It's really sickening. We live in the 21st century. Let's be honest and forthright. Secondly, I would like to see an apology by our government and Department of Health, to be honest with you, how poorly they have handled this whole thing. It's been very mismanaged. Third, I think there needs to be compensation to the people who've been impacted, either by paying their insurance or some type of compensation if they lost their land. I know several people have lost their livelihood, such as farmers, where they sprayed the cows and the cows dropped over dead the next day. We've got, 3 or 4 farmers like that. It's really an epidemic, to be quite honest with you, and it's going to get worse, I believe, because they have not addressed the issue. And like Angie said, these poor people are moving into all these new neighborhoods. They do not know that their wells are contaminated, and if they're on city water, their soil is contaminated with dioxins.
I would like for them to clean up Good Area B. And I think they need to do a survey, a survey of the wells in the area. Are you contaminated? No. Or could they be contaminated in the future? I don't know, but that Good Area B needs to be cleaned up.
And I don't think there's ever going to be an answer that says, yeah, Dietrich caused these cancers. I don't think that can ever be answered. The biggest thing for me is what's there needs to be gotten out of there. It's that simple. And I just hope that the day doesn't come when something down there gets out and we all regret that something wasn't done before, because I firmly believe that's a possibility, and I don't want to see that happen. So if you were to look at alternative ways of trying to answer this question, there are many such possibilities. You could do a case control study where you selected a number of people with similar cancers and then went back and tried to identify some of the features that were different or not different between them and similar people living in the same area or some other kind of comparison population. You could look at people who used to live in the neighborhood, try to identify them, and do a kind of an analysis there by pairing them off with people who used to live in the neighborhood who didn't have cancer, and try to exhaustively figure out what was similar or different between them. There are many such possible scenarios. The problem is that all of them would require a lot of effort, and in order to be able to show something statistically, you'd be talking still about finding a large number of people and resources that are certainly beyond the department at this point.
In this case, I don't think infinite resources would change the situation. Mm-hmm. There's no way to whatever the resources, there's no way to go back and reconstruct those exposures.
So one of the most challenging facets of the cancer cluster investigation is that we don't have verifiable cancer information for all persons who lived in the area of Fort Detrick for all years. And so when I try to take a look at, well, how can we best answer the question, I have to sort of figure out what the question is. And in fact, I convened and continue to meet with members from the community, we call it the Community Technical Advisory Committee, because during some of the public meetings that the health department convened, people would stand up and say, well, I have an idea of how you can answer the question. I have an idea. Well, there were lots of good ideas that people had. All of the proposals had significant methodologic flaws. I could even say relying on the Maryland Cancer Registry data is also, there are methodologic flaws because it doesn't capture people who were diagnosed after they moved away from the area. And so I look at it as a large puzzle, and that we will never be able to fill in all the pieces to see the picture. But there might be different approaches that we can start to fill in some of the pieces.